Sorry. I had all this stuff written down and then I put my notepad down. Okay. Calling the meeting to order. A few minutes after 6:30. Moving on to the roll call. We have, just to state who's all on the call, we've got Councilor Moody, Councilor Swearingen, Councilor Kennedy, myself, City Administrator Mike Roth, Communications Director Patrick Knight, Finance Director Kim Dunsmore, and City Attorney Chris Hood. Those are all the people who are on the call right now. And so we'll move along right away to the summary of this meeting. So the purpose of this meeting, this is an emergency meeting, meaning that we can only discuss issues that are related to the emergency at hand, which is the coronavirus emergency. We'll be a little bit flexible today because there's probably something else that people would like to discuss, but we want to also stay on task. There are some pieces of information that City Administrator Mike Roth has for us to consider, and just an overall update for the status of the emergency. So with that said, I think that I'll probably hand it over to Mike, acknowledging that there is a bit of an elephant in the room for that we can maybe talk about later. So go ahead, Mike. You got some stuff to show us and some stuff to think about.
Yeah, so we're not going to be asking you to make any decisions tonight. We'll just have a brief update, and we had said we would talk about some financial projections. So what we have tonight is just a couple of financial results from the liquor store in March and April, and I will show you what I got. So you can see, March sales are not a big month in the liquor store, even though that's a pretty big number. But they're quite down in 2020. That's no surprise because we were closed for 13 days in March in 2020. So considering 40% of the month we were closed, I'd say that's a pretty good result. And I think the biggest reason for that result is because we had this little 2-day sale on March 17th and 18th of $26,000 of total, and that's the 2 days before we ended up closing. Actually, the 17th was a Tuesday that we did about $18,000 worth of business, and then we did the rest of it the following day. There was no notice that we were going to close, but I think people were just anticipating that given the situation. Our normal Tuesday and Wednesday is $3,000 to $4,000 a day. So the days that we were closed, the 19th through the 31st, we averaged about $58,000 in sales the past 3 years. But because our 2-day total of 17-18 was so high, we're not 60,000 short in March, but we're an easy 30 to 35,000 short in March, and maybe 40 if we were having a good year. So it was definitely a real effect to be closed for those 2 weeks monetarily. As we look more into April, the average weekly total that we did for April in 2017 to 19 was about $31,000 a week, and we're open since April 1st, and our average weekly total is about $28,000. So you can see we are not quite meeting our 3-year average, but we're not that far behind. But if we were to project that out for the entire month, that's about a $14,500 shortfall. Again, if we were hoping to do better in 2020 than we did in 2019, then we could even say it's a little bit more than that. Let's take a look at why that is. So this chart just shows the totals by day of the week in April. Again, the average, the blue line is the average that we've had in the past 3 years. You can see that Sundays are pretty low. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are following as pretty low, and then Fridays and Saturdays are pretty high. Our curve for 2020, obviously we're not open on Sundays right now, so that's that's just lost revenue. The rest of the days of the week, until we get to Friday and Saturday, we're actually maintaining the same level of business that we did before, but those weekends aren't quite as busy. We can imagine some of that is due to decreased tourist traffic, although in April there's not a lot of it. But I suspect some of it's also just due to the way we're doing business. We're not able to handle as much traffic as we have in the past. So what does it all mean? If we stay on a similar track and we manage to do, say, 80% of the business that we were hoping to do, our expenses are not, other than purchasing beer and liquor, our expenses are probably going to be a little bit higher than they were in the past. But if we just hold everything but our product expenses flat and do 80% of the business that we've done in the past, then we can get by this year without too much difficulty. We budget $200,000 every year from the liquor profits to go into the general fund. And I think at 80% capacity, we'll still be able to meet that $200,000 transfer amount. It's obviously really hard to do any predictions of what's going to happen this year. And even making, 80% is a number that we can't really project because we're looking at March numbers and April numbers, and the numbers that really matter are July numbers and August numbers. The traffic we're managing is basically locals right now, and if it's just locals in July and August, then there's not going to be a lot more volume than we've got, and we're not going to touch 80%. We're going to be lucky to hit 50% of our business, and if that's the case, then it's going to be a very painful year. So there's no point right now in making predictions that far ahead, but when we are thinking about scenarios for all of our departments, we're starting to think about, what's the best case if we open up, and what's the worst case if things stay about the same for an extended period of time. So that's what I wanted to show you from the liquor store. We're going to do a similar effort for the rec park, which is our other really big revenue generating source. We've already got some numbers that we're running on it. The park board is going to be scheduling a meeting hopefully early next week, and we'll have a chance then at your next Wednesday's meeting to talk about that. Does anybody have any questions about liquor store results?
I just have a question for clarification there, Mike.
Okay.
So those numbers that we have for March, great. We get that. Those are the actuals that we have right now, how it compares to the past. What do you know off the top of your head what a typical week in the summer, like in a July week, like what the sales would be for that as well, or is that something you don't have prepared?
I don't have that in front of me. We know that April and March are really probably two of the lower months that we do during the year, and July and August are order of magnitude bigger. So, I mean, we're doing over $2 million of business in a year, and if 6 of the months look like March, then the other 6 are quite a bit larger.
Right. Any other questions about the liquor store financial presentation there?
Yeah, I just have a question. It's really more of a general question about just revenues in general. We just talked about the liquor store, but the rec park, what has me a little concerned is, what might happen with property taxes if, the county sees a number of people that can't pay their property taxes. Have you had any conversations with Brady at all, or can you keep us abreast of any conversations you might have with him about how that may play out if the county doesn't collect the revenues, tax revenues that are anticipated?
Yeah, that we just received a brief question from Brady based on the county's ideas about what they're going to do with property tax payments, and it was, if you don't receive X percent of your first half payments, are you going to be all right? And X percent was 25%, 50%. They don't really know what's going to happen. But what they're thinking about is allowing some leeway with folks that they imagine will generate some people not paying. And obviously some people are just going to be in difficult financial situations, unable to pay. So we're certainly thinking about, what does a significant reduction in the tax collection look like as well, and even as much as 50%.
Wow.
We didn't answer Brady yet because there's a lot of variables involved there. Well, I mean, is it 50%, and does that mean like if we get it in 6 months instead of in June, we get it in December, or do we never get it, or what do you mean by are we going to be okay? The city is still healthy financially, and we certainly have the ability to absorb even a significant hit to the property tax if it's a short-term hit. Where we're going to be vulnerable is that all of our revenue sources are going to be affected at the same time. So our liquor store sales, our rec park revenues, our golf course revenues, our marina revenues, our property tax revenues, and then pretty soon, if everything is, that scenario can get pretty nasty looking. So, we'll certainly test that out and see what it looks like. Right now, we're not planning on that happening, but we do need to just be thinking about what if. So just to talk about some of our other revenues and what we know, SIMPA did a chart of their electrics demand in March and April. And the idea is, what's happening with electricity sales. And it was actually surprising that the reduction in SIMPA's load was not what you might have expected with the significant shutdowns that are happening. But they offered to show us a chart of individual cities rather than the entire system together. And I just received that this afternoon, and I'll send that around to everybody so you can look at it. But you can see the day that the hotel's closed, and there's about a 10% reduction in our load, and it maintained, that much lower than our previous 3 years average. So once again, if we're talking about that kind of reduction, 10% in our electricity sales, 20% in our liquor sales, 20% in our property taxes, all of those things are very survivable for us without long-term effects if they're only for a few months. If the percentages get a lot higher, or if the duration gets a lot longer, then we have to start making some really tough decisions.
Can I ask, has there been any conversation with Dave as far as the rec park goes? I mean, I don't know where conversation is at with that. I mean, that maybe locally here with us, but also, has there been dialogue within the state or the county as far as what the prospects are on that? Like, do we think that the rec park will open this summer? Or do we just think it'll be a late start? Do we think it won't open at all? Or do you have any idea?
Well, I won't give you a prediction yet because I don't want to shortcut the park board's next week's conversation, where I think they're going to make some decisions about what happens in May. And just so suffice it to say that the scenarios we're looking at are, what if we don't open at all? And what if we open on May 4th? And a couple of in-betweens.
Sure.
So, we're putting some of those ideas together. The park board will be talking about that next week. And then next week we can have a little lengthier conversation about what we think is going to happen there. As we're putting together our ideas, the sort of things we're thinking about are, how do we maintain social distancing if we have a full campground, or if we have some limited amount of campsites going? Can we run bathhouses at all and maintain social distancing? How do we protect our staff? Do we let people in the park office at all? So basically the same kind of conversations that all retail establishments are having. We have some benefits at the park because some of our folks that are guests there are pretty self-sufficient and don't require any of our services. So it seems likely that there'll be some ability for us to operate, but there's a lot to still think about and learn. Dave and I did have a nice conversation with the county emergency staff and with Grace on Monday to start kind of getting them involved in the conversation as well. Make sure that we get their help, and when we're thinking about what we're going to be doing there, if it makes sense to them. And then I know that just the broader countywide lodging and other businesses are also engaging in conversations with the county health establishments to have the same conversation. How do we open? What does it look like? What are the best practices? And I think in the next week or two that a lot more information is going to come out on that.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I just was wondering about it.
Well, is that a good segue to getting into the projections for the rec park?
Well, we're not going to talk about those tonight. I want, again, let the park board dig in a little bit before we start doing too much speculating at your meetings. So hopefully that's next week for you.
Okay. So what was the other one? You said there was another thing that you wanted to present then.
No, I just wanted to show you the liquor sales information. We don't have any other changes that have occurred emergency-wise for us in the past week. I'll probably have some more things to update you on Friday as we've done some more conversations with some of our consultants on ongoing projects, and hopefully there'll be some progress to report there. Otherwise, there's nothing else that I've got to talk to you about tonight.
Okay. So then that's the update then, the emergency update, correct?
Yeah. So this meeting we've scheduled it weekly, and I think the idea was that we wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to weigh in on decisions that needed to be made a little bit faster than your normal schedule. Obviously, we can't generate content for weekly meetings at the same level that we can for your regular meetings, and we're not really trying to. And even tonight, obviously, there was we didn't send out an agenda on Friday because there really wasn't anything on an agenda for you to look at before the meeting. So if that still works for folks, I think it makes sense for us to hold this date and time on a weekly basis. But I think we also need to give ourselves permission maybe to just not hold the meeting if we don't need it. And I do think we'll need it next week because I'm hoping that we'll get to talk about the rec park. But in the future, I'm suggesting that maybe we'll have this set aside, but we may only hold it if we've got something to say or if you have something we need to talk about, if that makes sense.
That seems to make sense. And so, Mike, you and I should get in touch a couple of days before, or even like the Friday before one of the emergency meetings to see if there's anything that we need to talk about, especially, and just kind of stay in touch throughout as we go to Wednesday to make sure that there's that we have something to discuss. If there isn't, then we'll just say, no new developments, and away we go. So if that works, I think that sounds like a path forward for that. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay. So I mean, that's all that we have for the emergency discussion. The elephant in the room that I mentioned before. I mean, I think everybody's been thinking about, like, Tim, you and your family and the other folks that were impacted by the fire downtown. I couldn't just give a really short update about the outpouring of support that I've been privy to that's happened. There are relief funds that have been set up for each of the businesses, and like a general one for the businesses as well. And I've had pretty much all of our major legislators, both state and federal, reach out and say that they're really, they're behind us, and if we need anything, to let them know. And they'll be looking for resources that could be potential helps to come in here. League of Minnesota Cities reached out to me. It hasn't been a short list. So we definitely have been getting a lot of attention, and I know that there's a lot of people that are trying to send as much goodwill as they possibly can up here while we're all sheltering in place. So that's all very helpful, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of that coming in the future. But this is a great time for all of us to work on sticking together and supporting one another and seeing how we can try and help get through this. So that's just a kind of a rough summary of the last couple of days, for me and the people that have reached out. I think that a lot of the news coverage has been really tactful, and that's been really good. So, yeah, I think that it's good for us to keep our ears on that, but it's, we got to stay focused on the community here too. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, and I may as well, chime in a little bit too. I mean, certainly our family and the other families appreciate the support the community is giving. I've talked to Rob Epland. I've talked to others that have basically chimed in their level of support too, and we're all kind of in shock, and people are asking the questions about, well, are you going to rebuild? I mean, obviously the first question we need to answer is how are we going to get this mess cleaned up? And I am working with the other property owners to try to put together one concerted contract to get that to happen, and hopefully soon. But it still takes time to put that together. And I had conversations with North Shore Waste today, and also Thorson's about getting bids or quote in to do that. I know we've talked to our insurance adjuster, and Larson's have talked to their insurance adjuster. I had a call into Hingo's today. I have not heard back from them, but Larson's had already talked to them earlier in the day also. So, we are communicating with each other. Hopefully we can all work together to, kind of speed this kind of at least site recovery along. It's certainly a hazard and an eyesore right now, and the sooner it can get cleaned up, I think the better for the community. So, I mean, with that, we certainly appreciate all the support and encouragement that everybody in the community is giving. Fire departments that responded obviously did a pretty remarkable job compared to just those 3 buildings, and certainly could have been a lot worse. And we're fortunate, I think.
Yeah, I think that there will be definitely some debriefings going through the fire department for that as well. And there was one more thing I was going to say. It just totally left me though, but probably wasn't that important. We're just glad everybody's okay, really. That's what it comes down to. So,
Jay, if I can just share, and I don't mean to take anything away from any of the businesses. We've talked a little bit about, I had Facebook about people. I thought the fire department's emergency personnel all were outstanding in what they did. And I think sometimes we don't forget about those people, but they're all far in the back of our mind when they're not out front. And in talking with Ben, we wanted to do some sort of, if we wanted to step forward and gift money or do different things, people have talked about that. Ben called me back and we had a bit of a conversation because they wanted to make it about our fire department or Maple Hill or whoever. And so if people are interested in doing any sort of in-kind gift to them, it would go to the Cook County Fire Chiefs Association, which then gets used by all of the departments within the county. And they actually are trying to build up that for trainings. So I just want to leave that out there. That obviously isn't the focus, but if anyone talks to any of you or questions come across, that we're directing things to is to that. Either they could contact me with questions or Ben or any chiefs if they know them. So I will just leave that out there. And Tim, my prayers are with all of you and this all together, and we'll come back, I hope. I know it's one day at a time.
Thank you.
anything else? I know that that's kind of an odd thing to end an emergency meeting with, but it's a different type of emergency.
I don't know if it would be worth mentioning, if we can mention it about Jay, do you want to talk at all about the project backstop stuff for businesses?
Say that again. It kind of broke up.
The project backstop. You
Oh,
familiar with that?
That's directly related to the COVID thing, so we could certainly talk about that as well. Then that's a project that I think we can talk about that now. It's been pretty much finalized.
Do you want me to talk about it?
Oh, is that Tim that's getting the feedback? Okay. Anton, if you have more recent information, go ahead and toss it out there. I haven't heard back about it for a couple of days since we started the actual figuring it out thing. So go ahead.
Yeah. So we had an EDA meeting last night, and that's where it got basically finalized and discussed. And so basically what it is there was a organization who's remaining anonymous. They want to remain anonymous, who is looking for a community, a county, a city to help during this time. And as of like this morning at 6:30 in the morning, it was official, and the check was written, and basically the money was given to the EDA as the distributor and of the grants, but the Cook County and Grand Marais EDA received $80,000 from Project Backstop, a relief grant, and it's to provide critical relief for small businesses within Cook County struggling with things right now. And the objective is to provide immediate relief for small businesses while they navigate the different federal and state programs and other things that are out there. And the fund is really only designed for immediate needs. So if it's rent or utilities, payroll, and to keep businesses operating for those that are struggling right now. And the grant size is up to $2,500. And the eligibility requirements is that your business is in Cook County. You must be an existing small business, and you can only have 6 full-time employees or less. So if you have more than 6 full-time employees, you don't qualify. If you have less, or maybe a couple full-time and part-time, then you can apply. And businesses where timing is critical. So it's this organization, this group reached out. So the purpose of it is to prevent closures of the small businesses during and after this time, restoring the businesses back to financial health as quickly as possible, recycling funds to continually help those in need. So part of the thought is that if there's an opportunity in the next 12 to 18 months where you could potentially, when things are, if normal comes back, able to pay back that, then you can do that. And if you can't, then that's okay. But if you can, then they would basically every 5 days, they're doing a block of loan or of applications, and then they'll award and kind of doing it in different waves. Maybe sounds a little bit crazy, but it seems pretty amazing that the folks from that organization chose us to. So if anybody has questions, if their business would potentially qualify, you can get a hold of Mary Somnus, and her email is director@prosperitynorth.com. Also, you can get a hold of Pat Campanaro, and she's pcampanaro@gmail, and Campanaro is CAMPANARO@gmail.com, pcampanaro. And they'll send you, it's 3/4 of a page application. Really pretty straightforward. And it's a pretty, I think, great opportunity to help a lot of the small businesses out up here, to kind of be able to fill some of those gaps as we kind of try and ride this thing out. So anyway, I would encourage, anybody that has a business that would qualify to certainly take advantage of this opportunity.
Thanks, Anton.
Yep.
I think that's a pretty good summary. Do we have anything else? Well, hearing none, then I think that our business here is completed. Mike, you don't have anything else? Patrick, Kim? All right, well, thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday night to come and get the summary. We'll adjourn the meeting now. It's 7:02.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yep, bye.